Hello, everyone. Dr. Mad here. Let's get mad about an inspector calls. So we are almost at the end of Act 3. So this is where we'd got to. So let's listen to a bit more audio and then we'll go through it.
But how do you know it's the same girl?
We all admitted it.
You all admitted something to do with a girl. But how do you know it's the same girl? Mr. Burling, you sack a girl called Eva Smith. You've forgotten, but he shows you a photograph of her, and then you remember, right?
Well, that part's straightforward enough. But what then?
Well, he happens to know that Sheila once had a girl sacked from Millward's shop. He tells us that it's this same Eva Smith, and he shows her a photograph that she recognises.
Yes.
But how do you know it's the same photograph? Did you see the one your father looked at?
No.
And did your father see the one he showed you?
No. I see what you mean.
We've no proof it was the same photograph, and therefore no proof it was the same girl. Now, take me. I never saw a photograph. He caught me out by suddenly announcing that this girl changed her name to Daisy Renton. I gave myself away at once because I'd known a Daisy Renton.
And there wasn't the slightest proof that this Daisy Renton was really Eva Smith. We've only his word for it. And we'd only his word for it that he was a police inspector. And we now know he was lying. So he could have been lying all the time.
Exactly. Now, what happened after I left?
I was upset because Eric had left the house, and this man said that if Eric didn't come back, he'd have to go and find him. Well, that made me feel worse still. And his manner was so severe, and he seemed so confident. Then quite suddenly he said I'd seen Eva Smith only 2 weeks ago.
Those were his exact words.
And like a fool I said I had.
I don't see now why you did that. She didn't call herself Eva Smith when she came to see you at the committee, did she?
Of course she didn't. But when he suddenly turned on me with those questions, I answered more or less as he wanted me to.
But, Mother, he showed you a photograph of the girl before that, and you obviously recognised it.
Did anybody else see it?
No. He showed it only to me.
Then there's still no proof it was the same girl. He might have showed you the photograph of any girl who applied to the committee. And how do we know that she was Eva Smith or Daisy Renton?
Gerald's right. He could have used a different photograph each time, and we've been none the wiser. We may all have been recognising different girls.
Eric, did he ask you to identify a photograph?
He didn't need a photograph by the time he got round to me. But obviously it must have been the girl I knew who went to see Mother.
Why must it?
She said she had to have help because she wouldn't take any more stolen money. And the girl I knew had told me that already.
But even then, that may have been all nonsense.
I don't see much nonsense about it when a girl goes and kills herself. You lot may be letting yourselves out nicely, but I can't. Nor can Mother. We did her in all right.
Now, wait a minute. Don't be in such a hurry to put yourself into court. That interview with your mother could have been just as much a put-up job. Like all this police inspector business, the whole damn thing can have been a piece of bluff.
How can it? The girl's dead, isn't she?
What girl? There were probably 4 or 5 different girls.
Oh, that doesn't matter to me. The one I knew is dead.
Is she? How do we know she is?
That's right. How do we know any girl killed herself today?
Now, answer that one. Let's look at it from this fellow's point.
Okay, let's just go back. So this is where we were. So this page is fairly straightforward. You can pause the video and read through it. Now, the important point here, though, is that this in Act 3, there's quite a lot of time spent on this thing about the photograph, but you shouldn't waste too much time on this, okay, in your essays and so on, or even when reading and analyzing the play. This is Priestley just being entertaining for the audience, okay? In terms of the analysis of the play, the themes, the characters, we don't need to worry too much about it, except for the fact that Mr. and Mrs. Burling and Gerald use this to try and make themselves feel better, whereas Eric and Sheila say, look, this is irrelevant. We still did what we did. A girl is still dead. Okay, so that's the important point to note here. So let's just move on to the next page. And so yes, same thing here. You can pause the video and just read through this, but you don't need to worry too much about it. So I'm going to move to the next page. So same thing here, just read through the page, but we don't need to analyze anything here except what we've already said. So let's move to the next page now. So same thing here, pause the video. I mean, you should read through the lines just so that you've got the whole play in your head. But the trick is, and this is where a good teacher comes in, is to know which bits to focus on and not get sidetracked too much into these bits about the photo or whether the inspector is a ghost or not. All right, so moving on to the next page. So same thing here. Just read through all this. The main thing here is this line. Okay, so moving on to the next page. Actually, this is where we left off, so let's listen to a bit more audio.
Point of view. We're having a little celebration here and feeling rather pleased with ourselves. Now, he has to work a trick on us. Well, the first thing he does is to give us such a shock that after that he can bluff us all the time. And he starts right off. A girl in the infirmary has just died in agony.
All right, don't pile it on.
You see, just repeating it shakes you a bit. And that's what he had to do. Shake us at once, and then start questioning us until we didn't know where we were. Oh, he had the laugh of us all right.
He could laugh his head off if I knew it really was all a hoax.
I'm convinced it is. No police inquiry, no one girl that all this happens to, no scandal.
And no suicide?
We can settle that at once.
How?
By ringing up the infirmary. Either there's a dead girl there, or there isn't. Hello? The infirmary, please.
It will look a bit odd, won't it? Ringing up at this time of night.
Is that the infirmary? Yeah, this is Mr. Gerald Croft of Crofts Limited. Yes. We're rather worried about one of our employees. Have you had a girl brought in this afternoon who committed suicide by drinking disinfectant? Or any other suicide? Yes, I'll wait. Yes? You're certain of that? I see. Well, thank you very much. Good night.
Well?
No girl has died in there today, and they haven't had a suicide for months.
There you are. The whole story's just a lot of moonshine. Gerald, have a drink.
Thanks. I think I could do with one now.
Yeah, so could I.
I must say, Gerald, you've argued this very cleverly.
Well, you see, while I was out of the house, I'd had time to cool off and think things out a little.
Yes, he didn't keep you on the run as he did the rest of us. I'll admit now, he gave me a bit of a scare at the time. But I'd had a very special reason for not wanting any public scandal just now. Here you go, Gerald.
Thank you, sir.
Well, here's to us.
Father, you're forgetting one thing I still can't forget. Everything we said had happened, really had happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us. But it might have done.
But the whole thing's different now. You can see that, can't you?
No.
You all helped to kill her. Oh, I wish you could have seen the look on your faces when he said that. Oh, come on, Sheila. You'll have a good laugh over it yet. Look, you'd better ask Gerald for that ring again. Then you'll feel better.
You're pretending everything's just as it was before.
I'm not.
We've been had, that's all.
So nothing really happened? So there's nothing to be sorry for? Nothing to learn? We can all go on behaving just as we did.
Well, why shouldn't we?
I'll tell you, whoever that inspector was, it was anything but a joke. You knew it then. You began to learn something. And now you've stopped. You're ready to go on in the same old way.
And you're not, eh?
No, because I remember what he said. How he looked. And what he made me feel. Fire, blood, and anguish. And it frightens me the way you talk. I can't listen to any more of it.
I agree with Sheila. It frightens me
I'll
too.
go to bed then.
We're overtired, dear. In the morning we'll be as amused as we are.
Sheila, everything's all right now. So, what about this ring?
No. Gerald, not yet. It's too soon. I must think.
Oh, now, look at the pair of them. The famous younger generation who know it all. They can't even take a joke. Yes? Yeah, Mr. Burling speaking. What? Hello? Hello?
Father?
Mr. Bering?
Arthur, who was that?
The police. A girl has just died on her way to the infirmary after swallowing some disinfectant. And the police inspector is on his way here to ask some questions.
Okay, so that's the ending there. Let's just go back to where we were. So this is where we were. So yeah, again, I'm not going to go through this page. Just pause the video and read through the lines. So I'm going to move to the next page now. So same thing here. So this is Gerald. He's saying we can find out once and for all by ringing the infirmary, the hospital. So you can pause the video and read the lines here. So moving to the next slide. And same thing here. Just pause the video and read through the lines. Nothing much to analyze really. This is all just part of the entertainment by Priestley for the audience. Okay, moving to the next slide. And same thing here, except to notice that he's still going on about his public scandal. And then here, he actually mimics the inspector. You all helped to kill her, pointing at Sheila and Eric, and he's laughing now. Okay, let's move on to the next page. So this page is worth looking at. So these lines, we'll pick these out in the summary. It frightens me the way you talk. And look, he's even wanting Gerald to give back the ring, wanting Gerald and Sheila to get back together, despite the fact that Gerald had an affair with this girl whilst he was with Sheila, despite what he did, despite everything that they've all done. He just wants to go back to how they were. He hasn't learned a thing. And this line here, we can all go on behaving just as we did. Nothing to learn. And she's just so disappointed that they had begun to learn. So remember Mr. Burling saying, oh, I'd give thousands and thousands. And even Mrs. Burling towards the end had started to get emotional. I mean, this is their grandchild who was killed, remember? Not just a young woman killing herself, and not just any young woman, not just any child, but their grandchild. Okay, moving on to the next slide. And then this page, there are a few lines we can look at here. So fire and blood and anguish. So who said that? Well, Sheila's actually told you who said that. So Inspector Gould. And what technique is this? A triplet. And what was he referring to? World War One. and also indirectly World War II as well, or at least Priestley was. And notice here towards the end, Eric and Sheila have changed. The other three haven't. And this is just a little bit of plot development here about the ring. And then this quote, the famous younger generation. So again, this is one of the main themes of the play, the difference between the generations. And now the last page, and obviously this very dramatic ending. So like I say, please don't waste too much time on this whole thing about the photograph and who the inspector is. Just 2 or 3 sentences if you want to, if it's relevant to the essay and to the argument, but no more than that. You should be focusing on the themes, the characters, the use of language. Okay, so we've got time in this video to summarize Act 3, and then we'll have a separate video to summarize and revise the whole play. Okay, so we are going to revise Act 3. And here we have Eric and Inspector Gould. So we know that Priestley reverses Eric and Sheila at the end for dramatic effect, because otherwise the revelation that Eric is a father wouldn't be so effective. So let's go through the summary. Eric is the final character to be interviewed by Inspector Gould. We learn that he forced himself on Eva Smith and then made her pregnant. Eric confirms that he stole the money from his father's business. Eric finds out that his mother refused to help Eva and hence contributed to the death of her own grandchild. The inspector leaves after delivering his fire and blood and anguish speech. Gerald returns to say that Gould is not a real police inspector. Arthur makes a phone call to confirm this. They have a long discussion about whether the photograph was of the same girl. Gerald makes a phone call to confirm that no girl committed suicide that night. Mr. and Mrs. Burling and Gerald celebrate, but Sheila and Eric insist that nothing has changed. The phone rings to say that a girl has died and that a police inspector is on his way to ask some questions. Okay, so here are some simple questions. Actually, some of these questions are not as simple as in previous versions. So number 2, number 3. Yeah, actually, some of these questions are not as straightforward, but I have been through them many, many times. So hopefully you should be able to answer these questions. So please pause the video here and answer these questions before I go on to the answer slide. So I'm going to move to the answer slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and moving now. So here are the answers. I won't spend too much time on this, but just a couple of things here. So this I mentioned about the fact that we find out about Eric being the father wouldn't be as effective otherwise. And please note this one. This is quite important, okay? Don't waste too much time on the photograph or the reality of the inspector. Maybe just 1 sentence or maybe 2 or 3 sentences at most, depending on the question and the way you go about answering it. And also this thing here I mentioned before, but this bit I've added since the last time I spoke about this, that yeah, Priestley does this mostly for entertainment and so that the play doesn't come across as an essay, but also perhaps he's showing that some people will use any excuse to get themselves out of trouble. And then here we've talked about this, but this is quite important as well. Okay, so pause the video here to check your answers. And I'm going to move on to the next slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so here, what we've got is almost 3 pages of quotes. So similar to the last one, I'm not going to go through the quotes. What you need to do is cut these down. So sorry, let me just show you here. So task 1 is to reduce the above quotes by a third. Which ones do you think are the most important? Then compare with my version. So here's the first slide. So pause the video here. Which third of these would you cut? And when I say third, it doesn't have to be exact, okay? Just an indication. All right, so pause the video here and think about which third you would cut. I'm going to move to the next slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And same here, please. Pause the video. Which of these would you cut? Moving on to the next slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And same here. Obviously here you don't need to cut that much. So I'm going to move on in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So please make sure before you carry on that you have had a good go at that. It's not so much whether your version matches mine. It's about the process. That will help you to remember. Okay. Okay, so moving to the answer slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So here I've got 2 pages, okay? So pause the video here, compare your version to mine. Okay, so moving on in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Same thing here, please pause the video, compare your version with mine. And moving on to the next slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So please make sure that you've done that before you carry on, because you are now going to use those 2 pages and reduce them by a half, actually more than a half, because not just the number this time, but also the quotations themselves, cutting them down, ideally to about 2 or 3 words, although even my version doesn't quite do that, because we're just going through a process right now. When we do the final revision and final exam practice and so on, you'll learn how to cut your quotes down to 2 or 3 words. Sometimes that's not possible, but that's what you want to be aiming for. And normally you pick out a quote, you talk about it, and then you have to zoom into individual words and talk about the connotations of those words after having talked about the effects of the whole quotation. Okay, so please pause the video here, cut those 2 pages down into a page or less than a page. So moving on to the answer slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And here I will go through these in a bit more detail, but not too much because I did that as we went through the play. So, and also notice here that I don't have any of the character names. So by this stage, you should know which character is saying these quotes, okay? So I will remind you, but try to think before I give you the answer. So this one, I was in that state when a chap easily turns nasty. So this is Eric, not a very nice thing to say. And he's sort of implying that all chaps would do this, which I hope and I'm pretty sure that most would not. I wasn't in love with her or anything. Eric again. Do you notice a similarity with one of the other characters? So Gerald said something similar as well. So they both say, oh, we weren't in love, but they were quite happy to take advantage of this poor girl. Because you're not the kind of father a chap could go to when he's in trouble. Eric again, showing that the parents and children in this family don't really know much about each other, don't really get along, are not really that close, despite the initial impression we had right at the beginning of Act 1 with that nice dinner party. You'll be able to divide the responsibility between you when I've gone. Inspector Gould, theme of responsibility. I'd give thousands, yes, thousands. Mr. Berling, please do using repetition. And of course, we know, don't we? Does Mr. Berling really mean this? That's one of the questions, so I'm not going to give you the answer. Millions and millions and millions. We are members of one body, fire and blood and anguish. So I've cut down his speech into these 3 quotes. So Inspector Gould again. And various techniques there, which I'm not going to tell you because that's one of the questions. I'm ashamed of you as well. Yes, both of you. Eric, talking to his parents, and a contextual point that this is not how children would have spoken to their parents back in those days. I know things have changed nowadays. Children do talk to their parents in quite bluntly. You told us that a man has to make his own way. Eric again talking to his father, turning his own words back on him, which he did in the previously as well. Now, these next three lines are, I suppose we're all nice people now. You're just beginning to pretend all over again. It frightens me the way you talk. Who is this? This is all Sheila. But Eric also says similar things to show that Eric and Sheila have changed, whereas Mr. and Mrs. Burling and also Gerald have not changed at all. Look, you'd better ask Gerald for that ring you gave back to him, hadn't you? Mr. Burling is quite happy for Gerald to marry his daughter, despite knowing how Gerald has behaved. And why is that? Business reasons. The famous younger generation who know it all. Mr. Burling, so which theme is this? I won't give you the answer because that's one of the questions. Okay, I won't read through the questions, but please pause the video here now and answer these questions. So I'm going to move to the answer slide in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And there you go. Now, if some of these letters, some of these your answers don't quite match, that's okay. I mean, some of the quotes could be in other themes as well, but as long as you're fairly confident that you're on the right track, that's fine. So with all these questions, if you really struggle, you need to go through the whole act again. If you were about 50%, that's okay. You will go through the whole course again, okay? Everything has to be gone through 2 or 3 times at least when you're studying. It's not enough to just go through it once. Okay, so that's the end of Act 3. So I will just end on this slide as always. If you found this video useful, please do subscribe and tell all your friends about it, and see you in the next video where we'll revise the whole play.